Welcome to the Money Metals Midweek Memo, news and commentary relating to sound money, the precious metals markets, and the economy. I'm your host, Mike Maharrey. Thanks for tuning in. So, how much gold does the United States have? It's a simple question, right? We can just look it up. I'll Google it. So, the U.S. has 8,133.5 metric tons of gold. That's roughly 261.5 million troy ounces. Now, according to the official sources, about half of the U.S. gold, 147.3 million ounces of it, is stored at Fort Knox, and the rest is spread out between the Denver Mint, the West Point Bullion Depository, and the Federal Reserve Vault in New York City. So there you go. Case closed. End of podcast, right? Or is it? I mean, that's how much gold the government says it has, but we don't really know, do we? Because for some reason, they absolutely do not want to do a proper audit. Think about that for a second. Okay, so now let's do China. How much gold does China have? That should be pretty easy too. We can look it up. Officially, the People's Bank of China holds 2,346 tons of gold in its reserves. But can we trust Chinese gold accounting any more than we can trust America's? Yeah, no. It's not so much that the Chinese haven't done an official audit. I mean, I have no idea what their audit situation is. I would imagine it's probably every bit as untransparent as the U.S. audit system. But I do know that it's almost certain that the Chinese have a lot more gold than they officially claim. So let's sum this up. The U.S. may well have less gold than advertised, and China may have a lot more. So I kind of want to dig into this a little bit more deeply on the show today. But first, I want to thank you so much for listening to the show. And as always, express my appreciation. I say this every week, but it's true. I know there's so much out there vying for your attention. There's all kinds of voices. There's all kinds of influencers. I'm not an influencer. But I do appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you spend a little bit of time with me. Now, if you would be so kind as to help us out, I would really appreciate it. You can go to wherever you're listening to this podcast, whatever platform you download the podcast from, and write us a little review. Give us the 5 stars or the thumbs up or whatever metric that they use. These help boost the algorithms and will help grow the show. Because if you find value in what I'm doing here, probably other people will as well. The other thing that you could do, if you would be so kind, is to actually share these episodes on your own social media platforms and help expand the reach. If you would do that, I would appreciate it very much. Okay, let's start with the United States. How much gold does the U.S. have? Well, I've got some really good news for you on that front. We don't even really need to worry about that Fort Knox audit anymore. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent assured us all the gold is there. His comments came a couple of weeks ago during an interview on Fox News, and host Jesse Waters asked the Treasury Secretary point blank, "Have you visited Fort Knox?" And Scott said, "I haven't. People on my staff have. The treasurer has been to Fort Knox, and I'm happy to say all the gold is present and accounted for." So there you have it. The fox guarding the hen house says all the hens are safe and accounted for. Case closed. Or maybe not. Consider this. Would you trust a bank that never conducted an external audit? Would you trust a bank that just said, we don't need to do an audit. You can trust us. We're doing it all right. Audits are unnecessary, too expensive, waste of time. Would you trust a bank that constantly just tried to assure you by saying, trust me? Right? You shouldn't. And you wouldn't. You need to have audits. They're important. I have an accounting degree. I never did actually do accounting, but when I was in school, I actually liked auditing the best. I think if I had stuck with the accounting path, I probably would have been an auditor because I just see the importance of it. It's a crucial operation in any organization. And audits serve a variety of functions, right? In the first place, they catch honest mistakes, and we make honest mistakes. Inventory gets misplaced, bookkeeping entries get messed up, things get lost, out of sorts, right? So you need to have an audit so that you can catch those mistakes. It's just like me. I'm a pretty good writer, but I'm horrible at self-editing my writing. I need an editor. I need somebody to go behind me and catch those little things that just kind of slip past our brains. So auditing is important. Second, audits assure that the players who are in control of assets and the people who are reporting on an organization's financial dealings, that they are operating above board, right? That they're doing things the right way. It holds them accountable. It's a layer of oversight, and you need that when you're dealing with money. Any business that does not implement a regular and rigorous external audit program should be viewed with suspicion. And, it doesn't matter whether they're just lazy or whether they're really truly trying to hide something. If those audits aren't happening, it is a red flag. Now, if you ask the powers that be, they will assure you that the Fort Knox gold has been thoroughly audited. Anytime you bring up this subject, some naysayer will come in. Oh, come on, Mike, you're just a conspiracy theorist. You're just trying to stir up trouble. We've audited that gold. And, it's a little bit like the kid who stuffed all of his dirty clothes under the bed, claiming that his room has been thoroughly cleaned. Now, again, if you ask anybody in the government, they will tell you that the gold has been audited. It has not. Trust me, not properly, not in any meaningful way since at least the 1970s. Now, back in the 1970s, there was a TV show posing as an audit. In 1974, the government put together what, in essence, was a publicity stunt in the name of an audit. The U.S. Treasury opened just one of the 15 Fort Knox vault compartments to politicians and reporters, let them walk in, view the gold, confirm its existence. They held up some gold bars. It was a made-for-TV special. Matthew Cortez, who does some writing for us at Money Metals, he described this dog and pony show this way. For about 2 hours, multiple film and camera crews and smiling politicians filed into a hallway for the chance to hold a gold bar and peek into a room full of gold stacked up to the ceiling. On their way out, each visitor had to pass by a metal detector to ensure that none of the gold bars were being snuck out in the process. That's wise, I guess. Matthew said, notably, throughout the visit, none of the bars being passed around were ever matched to a serial number, assayed, or tested for purity, or even verified as part of the United States' holdings, right? Foreign countries have at times stored gold in Fort Knox as well. It seems the made-for-TV spectacle in 1974 was more of a pep rally than any credible proof of what the amount of U.S. gold purported to be in those vaults. So Matthew summed it up perfectly. So yeah, that's not an audit, right? It's political propaganda. In a proper audit, every bar would be counted, inspected, serial numbers would be matched to records, the gold would be assayed to verify its weight and purity, and the details of the audit would be published and available for public inspection. None of that has happened. Following the 1974 publicity stunt, the U.S. Treasury says it conducted a multi-year process of opening and inventorying vault compartments and affixing new tamper-evident seals to the doors of each compartment upon completion. And they call these audits. They are not. These so-called audits fail to meet basic transparency or accounting standards. Some reports have since gone missing. There's no record of any comprehensive assaying, weighing, or transactional history available for the public. There is no audit, right? Furthermore, there's actually evidence that seals on vault compartments have been broken over the years, bars have been moved for unknown reasons, and seals have been reaffixed without fresh auditing. Subsequent annual reviews of schedules and compartment seals completely whitewash prior discrepancies. So, Sum it all up. The U.S.'s Treasury, or the U.S. Treasury's management of U.S. gold reserves is replete with audit no-nos that would never pass muster at a responsibly run private depository. And the other curious thing about this is that anytime somebody like me says, maybe we should audit the Fort Knox gold, a bunch of government apologists will come out and indignantly and says, we don't need to. And then they'll attack me like I'm some kind of kook for even suggesting such a thing, right? They'll immediately say, conspiracy theorist, right? And these people don't trust the government. I don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, I guess I can understand if you oppose an audit due to the cost or some other practical reason, but it's not that expensive. And I can't understand why you would become indignant at the mere suggestion of an audit. Like, how could anybody even think that this is a good idea? Why would we do this? Why would you make this thing? Because that's what you do, right? Every company has audits. It's just normal. What's not normal is running around saying we don't need to have an audit. So maybe it's just me, but when somebody gets all upset when I suggest checking their work, I suspect that their work might not be up to par. Now, over the years, I've done a lot of work challenging government surveillance. Not a big fan of the government spy state. But when I do, I will always get government apologists who will come along and say, Mike, why are you worried about surveillance if you have nothing to hide? Now, I think that's a really dumb argument when it comes to surveillance because of the nature of government and the nature of government surveillance. But, I can kind of turn that question around on some of these folks who insist that we don't need any kind of audit. I mean, think about it. If you don't have anything to hide, why wouldn't you want the gold holdings to be verified? What's the harm in an audit? Why this insistence that it isn't necessary when audits are necessary in every other business setting? In fact, if I was running a gold depository, I'd be clamoring for a public audit. I would advertise the fact that I had public audits, if for no other reason than to calm public fears. I would want people to know everything is on the up and up, and I am committed to making sure everything stays on the up and up. The only reason I would resist an audit is if I knew I was hiding something. Pretty simple, right? Now, you know who isn't hiding anything? Money Metals. There is a robust audit program in place at our bullion depository in beautiful Eagle, Idaho. We have both internal and external audits. We have an internal team that's constantly auditing the vault, spot checking, going back over logs, making sure everything on a day-to-day basis is up to par. And then we also have external audits where a totally outside company comes in, audits everything in the vault, make sure everything is there. So if you're storing money or if you're storing gold and silver, which is money, in the Money Metals depository, you can be confident that your metal is there, it has been counted, it has been verified, and there's an outside team that is checking that work. And you can even have, once a year, if you have money, or if you have, I keep saying money, it's a Freudian slip because gold and silver are money. But if you have gold and silver stored at Money Metals, you can actually, once a year, we'll send a picture. Like we'll open up your little container and take a picture of your gold and send it to you so you can see that it's there. So we're committed. We're not going to hide our audit trail. We're not going to say we don't need an audit because we know we do. Absolutely imperative. So check that out. If you're interested in storing gold and silver, if you're looking for a safe place to store your gold and silver, you're not comfortable keeping large amounts of metal in your home, consider the Money Metals Bullion Depository. If you want more information about it, you can go to moneymetals.com, and up on the top, you'll see information about our storage program. So anyway, I guess it doesn't really matter how much gold there is in Fort Knox because Besant went out of his way to emphasize that we don't really need that gold because, hey, we have fiat currency now. He made these comments at the same time that he told us all of the gold was there. And he said, quote, "We used to be backed by silver, sometimes gold. And then in the 70s, we just went to what was called fiat currency, where you didn't have to keep gold or silver in the vault. If any of these are still outstanding, though, the silver or gold for them is at Fort Knox, waiting for them to be claimed if so needed." What's he mean by waiting to be claimed? Well, I guess he's kind of trying to make a joke because when gold was the backer of the dollar or even silver, you could take a Federal Reserve note to the bank and get metal in exchange, right? It was literally a note. It was a promise. It was backed by gold, and you could go get that gold. And so I guess Besant is trying to be funny, and he's saying, well, if anybody's still holding any of those silver certificates out there or any of those gold certificates, that gold's there at Fort Knox waiting for them to claim it. Ha, ha, ha. I'm a funny guy. What's funny to me is that most people in positions of power, and I'm talking about all around the world, not just in the United States, but they'll tell you that we don't really need gold in a modern financial system. And they'll kind of take this arrogant attitude that Besant had, right? That almost like gold is some relic. And yet countries all around the world are stacking gold bars in their vaults, right? Besant is almost saying, well, we don't really need this gold. And yet there is 8,000 tons of gold sitting in vaults. What's up with that if it doesn't matter, right? In other words, their actions don't match the rhetoric. Their mouths say, we don't need gold, but their actions say, we need gold and a lot of it. And you know who is buying a lot of gold? The Chinese. Talking specifically about the Chinese government right now, but Chinese investors are buying a lot of gold as well. China has reported increases in its official gold reserves for 21 straight months, and it has ramped up the pace of that gold accumulation. In June, China reported a 15-ton increase in its official gold reserves, and that followed a 10-ton purchase in May. Earlier in the year, we were seeing increases of 2, 3, 1 ton, much smaller, and the speculation is, well, the price is much lower now, so they feel comfortable buying larger amounts every month. Now, here's the rub. While there is reason to believe that the U.S. might not have as much gold as it claims, the Chinese almost certainly have far more gold than they claim. This has been one of the worst kept secrets in geopolitics for a long time. I was reading about the possibility of the Chinese increasing their gold reserves much faster than they were saying a decade ago. But oddly, the mainstream financial media rarely mentions it, at least not until recently. Now, they seem to be catching on. In fact, Goldman Sachs recently picked up on the fact that China is expanding its gold reserves far faster than the data indicates. In a recent note, Goldman analysts estimated that China bought more than 48 tons of gold in May via the London over-the-counter market. Now, remember, the People's Bank of China only reported a 10-ton increase in its gold reserves. In other words, it appears that the Chinese increased their gold holdings by 4.8 times what they officially reported in May. So, based on official numbers, the Chinese central bank added 40 tons of gold to its holdings in 2026 so far. That includes the 15-ton increase in June, which was the largest official monthly purchase in over 2 years. So Goldman, they took this 4.8 times, and then they decided we're going to be conservative. So they used a 2-time multiplier. So in other words, they assume that the Chinese have 2 times more gold than they're saying. And they estimate that the Chinese central bank has accumulated closer to 80 tons of gold so far this year, so double what they're claiming. And if we use that 4.8 times multiplier that was extrapolated from the May data, Chinese gold reserves have grown by 192 tons. Based on Goldman's Nowcast tool, China bought 67 tons of gold per month on a 3-month seasonally adjusted average through May. So the Chinese are accumulating gold based on Goldman's estimates, far faster than they're telling us. And that may seem surprising if you're not somebody who really kind of keeps up with the minutia in the gold market and all of the rumors and speculation that's out there. But people who are paying attention have known for a long time that China is almost certainly stacking gold faster than they're telling us. Last year, Money Metals researcher Jan Nieuwenhuis parsed the data, and he determined the Chinese central bank covertly bought 570 tons of gold in 2024. Now, how much gold did the People's Bank of China report buying that year? Just 41 tons. And it's interesting because if you look at the ratios, Nieuwenhuis's numbers dovetail with Goldman's. Nieuwenhuis wrote, since the Ukraine war began, data show China's central bank has been buying roughly 5 times more gold than what it discloses to the International Monetary Fund. And as you'll recall, Goldman estimated that in May, the Chinese bought 4.8 times more gold than they reported. So this kind of 5 times number, that works both with what Goldman has found and what Nieuwenhuis determined. Nieuwenhuis's analysis of formal and informal sources indicate that at the time, the People's Bank of China was sitting on more than 5,000 tons of monetary gold, more than twice what the Chinese publicly admit. And the mainstream media has all but ignored this story for years. However, it is starting to see the light of day. After Nieuwenhuis released his data, we published it at Money Metals. Last November, the Financial Times of London reported on the secret expansion of its gold reserves. And this was really the first time that a big financial media source has kind of brought this to light. The Financial Times wrote, quote, China's unreported gold purchases could be more than 10 times its official figures as it quietly tries to diversify away from the United States dollar, say analysts, highlighting the increasingly opaque source of demand behind bullion's record-breaking rally. So quite a few nuggets in that one little quote, right? They're saying that China may have 10 times the gold reserves that they're claiming. And it notes, I think, significantly that the Chinese are trying to diversify away from the United States dollar. That is true of many central banks right now. The rapid increase in gold reserves has come at the expense of Treasury reserves. We found out earlier this year that gold has actually surpassed Treasuries as the dominant central bank reserve asset. So gold is gaining, the dollar is losing slowly. I mean, I'm not trying to say here that the dollar is about to fall off of the perch as the reserve asset. We're not close to that, but there is a trend here, and the trend is worth noting, and the trend is important. And the fact that the Chinese are stacking gold as quickly as they are should tell you something. The Chinese know something. They understand something about money, and they understand that fiat currency ultimately is doomed. The dollar is ultimately doomed, and when that happens, you want to have gold. And that's exactly why the United States is holding on to the 8,000 tons of gold. They do need the gold. They just don't want to admit that they need the gold or why they need the gold. And that reason is fiat currencies always collapse because they're backed by nothing, and governments cannot resist the temptation to continue to print, and devalue. So we had the Financial Times last year, and now Goldman has joined the party in reporting on this phenomenon. However, this secret of Chinese gold accumulation dates back much farther than that. Much farther than the last 3 or 4 years. Analyst Jim Rickards speculated that Chinese gold reserves were far larger than reported in an article that was published more than a decade ago. He wrote, in mid-2015, China suddenly announced that its gold reserves had increased by 604 tons. The total rose from 1,054 tons to 1,658 tons. Since then, China has updated its gold reserves positions monthly, in keeping with IMF criteria. All of these figures are misleading because China keeps several thousand tons of gold off the books in a separate entity called the State Administration for Foreign Exchange, SAFE. Small amounts are transferred from SAFE to the People's Bank of China monthly, and that becomes the basis for the official reserve reports. So again, that was written by Rickards back in 2015. This was around about the time China was becoming more involved with the International Monetary Fund. And before that, the Chinese had not been reporting their gold holdings. They were just silent on it. And then all of a sudden, they made this big announcement. Hey, we've increased our gold reserves by 604 tons. This was all part of the yuan being included in the IMF's basket of currencies. The Chinese wanted that, so they started reporting gold reserves in order to accomplish that. But they're not reporting them honestly. They're reporting them at a lower level. They're reporting enough so that they can keep in good standing with the IMF. They're not reporting enough to give anybody a really good idea of just how much gold that the Chinese have. But we do know with pretty strong certainty that they have way more than they're officially announcing. And I saw an article the other day. I haven't really dug into the numbers yet, but I'm going to, and I'll write an article about this next week, so you can look for that over at moneymetals.com/news. But it was speculating that if you include the secretive purchases and the true amount of gold that the Chinese hold, that within 5 years, the Chinese actually could have more gold than the United States. So, interesting thing to think about, right? Goldman also noted, and I think this is important, that the Chinese gold buying is part of a broader trend of central banks globally expanding reserves. I've alluded to this myself. Investing Live summed up the Goldman position like this, quote, Goldman continues to frame elevated central bank accumulation as a multi-year structural trend tied to reserve diversification away from dollar assets, anchoring its $4,900 per troy ounce end 2026 price forecast. With private portfolio allocations to gold still low, the bank sees room for demand to broaden beyond central banks to private investors if geopolitical risks continue to build, keeping the medium-term price skew to the upside. So, couple interesting tidbits there. Even with the sell-off, even with the struggles that gold has had over the last several months, primarily due to this impression that the Federal Reserve is going to hold interest rates higher for longer, they're still looking for gold to be nearly $5,000 an ounce by the end of the year because they see the central bank gold buying as kind of a support. And indeed, central bank gold buying was a key source of support for the gold bull market that we've seen over the last year and a half or so, that we saw last year and in the late part of 2024. And that central bank gold buying is almost certain to continue. It's a trend. There's no sign that it's going to slow down. All of the survey work that has been done with central bankers, they all expect gold reserves to continue to climb, which again reiterates the point that gold is important. Gold is real money. These folks want to hold real money. So Goldman analysts said that they expect central bank gold accumulation to provide a price floor for the yellow metal, even as gold continues to face downward price pressure due to a hawkish Federal Reserve. So, speaking of the Fed, they are meeting even as I speak. It is the July FOMC meeting. And so this afternoon, Warsh will have a press conference. They'll announce the policy decision. And, I'll say this for Kevin Warsh, the new Fed chair. He has kept one promise. He's provided much less so-called forward guidance, right? He has said that he's not going to hint at what the Fed might do. He's going to kind of let it be a mystery, and he's definitely done that. There's actually a bit of uncertainty about what the central bankers are going to do. Most people think they're going to hold rates steady, but I have seen some speculation in a couple of banks saying they expect a surprise rate hike. And it's just notable that we don't really know. This is a different administration than what we saw under Jerome Powell. And I think Warsh wants to do less open mouth operations and just kind of let the markets guess and figure it out as it goes. I don't know that that's better or worse, but I think that's kind of what we can expect going forward. Now, I will say this. If the Fed does hike today, I kind of don't think they will. I think that deep down, I don't think Warsh wants to really surprise the markets. I don't know, maybe he does, but that's my gut. Central bankers, they tend to like to keep things pretty stable, right? Pretty even keeled. But if they do hike, I think it will hasten the debt crisis, and I think it will speed up an economic collapse. I think we're heading toward a recession. I've said this for a long time. I don't know when it's coming, but we still have not reckoned with the malfeasance of the pandemic era. We've not reckoned with all of the malinvestments and all of the misallocations of resources that undoubtedly occurred with nearly $5 trillion of quantitative easing, all of this money printing, all of this new money injected in the economy. In fact, we never really reckoned with all of the monetary malfeasance after the 2008 financial crisis. All of that is still bubbling in the system. We had this massive debt-backed black hole. We have an economy that is addicted to easy money. The Fed is trying to hold that punch bowl back. At some point, the party grower is going to have a fit. It's just inevitable. Again, don't know when it'll be. I thought it would happen probably a little sooner than it has, but, it hasn't. But at some point, right, the macroeconomic realities are going to catch up with this situation. And, in the meantime, I'm still near-term bearish, right? The Fed meeting will be a topic for next week. But I think overall, gold and silver is going to continue to languish. It's going to continue to trade sideways until the markets figure out that Warsh's inflation war is more a propaganda war than an actual war that we're going to fight with policy, right? And that's a nice buying opportunity for the Chinese, eh? And they appear to be buying this dip. And it's not just the government. Interestingly, gold imports into China surged to a 2-year high of 173 tons last month. I'll link to an article in the show notes page that will give a little bit more detail on the supply and demand dynamics in China. But just kind of a highlight, Januri Futures company analyst Ziji Wu told Bloomberg investors buying the price dip were, quote, an important driver of recent demand in China. So investors are looking at this dip in price that we've seen over the last several months as a buying opportunity. And Wu also noted that Chinese banks were motivated to use up import quotas to stock up on bullion. So again, I'll link to an article in the show notes that will give a little bit more detail on that. But buying the dip might not be a bad advice for American investors, because remember, no matter how many hawkish words come out of Warsh's mouth today, no matter what the Fed does in terms of monetary policy, we know one thing for certain: the dollar will be worth less a year from now than it is today. That's by design. Stealing 2% of your purchasing power every year is the plan. And of course, they're stealing your purchasing power far faster than the plan right now. So that means you need to plan accordingly. And today is the day. It's a perfect time to call 800-800-1865, talk to a money metals, precious metals specialist. Ask them questions. They can help you figure out how gold and silver can fit into your investment strategy, what products might be best for you. They'll answer your questions. These are very knowledgeable folks. When I was in Idaho a while back, I was very impressed with just the knowledge base of these folks. They're not just operators on a telephone. They are well-versed in monetary policy, in investment strategy. They know what they're talking about. So take advantage of that information. Now, I know a lot of folks don't really like talking on the phone, but you can actually chat with a precious metal specialist online at moneymetals.com. Or, you may know what you want. You want to get some Canadian gold maple leafs. You want to get some Irish silver rounds. You can go to moneymetals.com. You can find all of our products online. The website is very nicely organized, so you can find gold, silver, platinum. You can place your order online. We'll package up the metal. We'll ship it right to you. Or again, as I mentioned earlier, you can store your metal in our state-of-the-art bullion facility and be confident that it is being audited. But do it today, right? It's not going to get better. The situation's not going to change. There's nothing to wait for, right? There's nothing more to see here. They're stealing your purchasing power. They're destroying your money. You want to have money, real money, gold and silver. So that is a wrap for this episode of the Money Metals Midweek Memo. You can get more information about everything that I've talked about on the show today and a whole lot more over at moneymetals.com/news. And if you want to get the latest news and information relating to gold and silver right in your inbox, make sure you sign up and join a million other people on our email list. Of course, you could subscribe to the Midweek Memo on your favorite podcasting platform. And when you do, you will also be able to tune into our Market Wrap podcast that runs every Friday, where you're going to get a quick overview of the week in precious metals, along with conversations between yours truly and interesting people from the world of gold, silver, economics, and investing. This week, I'll be talking with Frank Holmes, so that'll be a great discussion. So check all of that out. Make sure you subscribe to our social media links. We're everywhere. You can find those things over at our website, moneymetals.com. And again, thanks for listening. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will be back again next Wednesday.